They say no one truly understands the strength of a mother until they've seen her rise after years of being underestimated. Grace Bennett, a woman in her 50s, quietly living in a modest apartment, seemed ordinary to everyone around her. No one knew that behind that simplicity was an entire world she had deliberately kept hidden. Even her son Daniel had no idea. To him, his mother was just an average office worker, someone who preferred silence over showing off. Until that night, the night Daniel invited her to dinner with his wife's family, a dinner where every light was dazzling, every smile polished, and every kind word carried a hidden blade. They thought she was poor. They thought she was small. They thought she was a woman out of place in their glittering world. But what they didn't know was that the woman they were belittling was powerful enough to make their entire world crumble with nothing more than the truth. This is a story of pride, truth, and the quiet power of a mother who taught her son's family the most expensive lesson of all, that money can never buy the worth of a human soul. Morning light spilled through the small window, casting a soft glow on the pair of hands carefully folding an old shirt. Grace Bennett smiled faintly, the quiet smile of someone long accustomed to simplicity. Her apartment was still and calm, filled only with the ticking of a clock and the faint aroma of black coffee. On the dining table lay a few financial newspapers, an old laptop, and one unread email titled Quarterly Executive Meeting Regional Directors. She slowly deleted the notification, exhaling a deep, weary breath, as if erasing the traces of a life her son had never known. A door opened. Daniel stepped in crisp white shirt, slightly crooked tie, bright eyes, and a rush in his stride. "Daniel, you're up early again, Mom? I told you, you should rest more." Grace, smiling softly. "When I was your age, I worked nights too. Making coffee now hardly counts as tiring. Daniel, you never know how to take a break. Anyway, there's something I need to tell you this weekend." He hesitated, voice tinged with nerves. "Grace, that sounds serious. You're not planning to propose to Lily again, are you?" "Daniel, no. Her parents are flying in from London, and they'd like to meet you. We've booked a table at a little restaurant, cozy and casual." Grace set her coffee cup down. Her gaze was calm, deliberate. "Grace, a little restaurant?" Daniel, avoiding her eyes. "Well, not exactly little. Lily's dad likes places that are a bit more upscale. But don't worry, they're very nice, very nice." The words lingered in the air, polite, but bitter. Grace looked at her son and saw, beneath his easy smile, something uneasy, a flicker of embarrassment, a trace of fear that his mother might not fit in. Grace, gently. "Did you tell them what I do?" Daniel, "I did. I told them you work in an office, administrative work, living alone, a simple life." A pause. Only the ticking of the clock filled the room. Grace nodded lightly, her smile still tender, though her eyes glimmered with something deeper. "Grace, that's good." Simple is probably the nicest word anyone could use to describe me. Daniel, regretful. "Mom, I didn't mean—" Grace cutting him off, calm but firm. "It's all right. I'm used to people thinking I'm ordinary." She turned toward the window. Outside, the city was waking up, streets buzzing, cars inching forward, people chasing time, while inside her, a quiet plan began to form. Her voice echoed softly, as if speaking to herself. "If my son thinks his mother is a poor, fragile woman, and his wife's family sees me as a burden, fine. Let them. I'll give them exactly what they expect to see. And when the mask falls, they'll see what they never imagined." The morning drifted on as usual. Grace sat before the mirror, brushing through strands of silver hair. She studied the woman looking back, gentle, unassuming, nothing like someone who had once signed million-dollar contracts or spoken confidently before entire boards. "Perhaps," she whispered, "it's time they learned that true strength doesn't shout. It's found in what we choose to stay silent about." The restaurant glowed under amber light. Dark oak walls reflected soft ribbons of recessed lighting, and the air was rich with the scent of browned butter, green peppercorns, and red wine, warm and full-bodied enough to make one believe happiness could be served on a white porcelain plate. Grace stepped inside. Her wrinkled gray dress brushed her ankles, and the worn edges of her shoes whispered against the polished floor. She walked slowly, delicately, as if afraid to wake something sleeping beneath the gleaming tiles. Daniel stood up quickly, fumbling to straighten his tie. Daniel, awkwardly. "Mom, you made it. Did you take a cab? Was traffic bad?" Grace, smiling softly. "No traffic. People made way for me." Daniel, forcing a laugh. "How polite of them." Lily came over and kissed Grace's cheek, the perfect balance of formality and grace. The faint scent of orange blossom trailed behind her, polite as a greeting in French. Lily. "Mom, Grace, I'm so happy you came. My parents have been eager to meet you." Grace. "I've been looking forward to meeting them too." At the head of the table sat Victoria, her emerald sequin dress shimmering like a frozen lake. Her gaze flicked over Grace's wrinkled fabric, pausing briefly on the faded canvas bag. Beside her, Gregory wore a slate gray suit and a thick platinum ring that glinted as he adjusted his oversized watch. His aftershave smelled sharp and cold. Victoria extending a cool hand, lightly gripping. "Hello, Grace." Gregory politely, but measured. "Pleasure to meet you." Grace, bowing slightly. "Good evening." "Thank you for having me." No one pulled out her chair. Grace seated herself quietly near the end of the table, an instinct long practiced by someone used to making room for others. A waiter arrived, placing before each of them a leather-bound menu, thick and cream-paged. The dishes listed in French and Italian, no prices shown. Grace opened hers. Her eyes skimmed the familiar words, but she let them drift by like water. Tonight was not about knowledge. It was about faces. Victoria, glancing a faint smile tugging at her lips. "The menu here is a bit refined. Would you like Lily to help you choose?" Grace, gently. "If you don't mind." "I'm not used to these fancy things." Daniel, quickly. "Maybe we should just get the set menu, keep it simple." Victoria, cutting in. "No, I'd rather we order individually. Everyone should get what they want." She waved to the sommelier. The woman approached, black vest, bow tie, expression polished to glass. Victoria. "Saint Emilion, 15, please. The good one. And go easy on the poor." Gregory to Daniel with a smirk. "Son, good wine only reveals its worth when you take your time with it." Daniel smiling faintly. "Of course." As the red wine streamed into crystal, light caught the liquid and painted it across the table. Grace's hand rested on her glass of water. Lily. "Mom, maybe have a sip? It'll warm you up." Grace. "Water's fine. Wine makes me dizzy." Victoria leaning back, amused. "Fair enough. Fine wine does take a trained palate. Not everyone's suited for it." Her eyes flicked again toward the canvas bag, as though taste itself had a price tag. The appetizer arrived, foie gras over toasted brioche, streaked with thick balsamic glaze and flecked with sea salt crystals. Victoria carefully slid the richest portion toward herself and carved neatly. Victoria. "In Paris, I used to have this every week. The chef here is adequate. When Lily's back in London, we'll take her to La Gabrielle. She'll know what the real thing tastes like." Lily, smiling politely. "Yes, of course." Daniel glanced at his mother's eyes, pleading for reassurance that everything was fine. Grace smiled gently. She cut her portion with practiced grace, as though rehearsing old etiquette. Victoria. "Grace, you work in administration, right? Whereabouts?" Grace. "A mid-sized company. I handle paperwork. My salary covers the rent." Gregory nodding, pontificating. "Stability matters most these days. Better that than chasing dreams." Victoria pressing. But stability can also be limiting, can't it? Young people need a stronger launch pad. She turned to Daniel, her benevolent smile perfectly misplaced. Victoria. A husband must carry responsibility to ensure his wife feels secure. We've helped quite a bit so they could start off on the right foot. You know what I mean. Daniel measured. Yes, and I'm grateful. Victoria, sweet but sharp. We help because we care, and because we want to ensure Lily's future doesn't fall behind. The phrase fall behind hit the table like a cold coin. Grace set her spoon down, smiling faintly. Grace, I understand. Every parent wants the best for their child. Victoria quickly. Exactly. That's why, forgive me for being direct, Grace living alone at your age, with rising expenses, no one to help, isn't that difficult? Daniel must feel the strain. Daniel's hands tightened beneath the table. Grace, calmly, I'm used to living modestly. When life gets hard, I just need less. It works. Gregory, chuckling, practical. Victoria, I truly admire independent women. Still, we don't want Daniel splitting his focus. Marriage needs both partners all in. You understand, Grace? The main course arrived, a perfectly seared steak, pink and glistening under melted butter. Victoria lifted her knife, speaking as though casually. Victoria, $80 for this dish. Expensive, but worth it. Quality always costs. Food and life, same rule. Grace sipped her water, lips curving in the thinnest of smiles. Grace, you're right. The best things are often rare, and the things worth keeping usually stay quiet. Victoria frowned, unsure if she'd been insulted. Dinner flowed like clockwork. Victoria filled the silence with talk of $1,000 a night hotels, small gifts worth thousands, vineyards in Europe. My daughter speaks Italian like wind. Gregory's closing a West Coast deal. Her words poured smoothly, like aged wine, just enough to make everyone forget that water is what truly quenches thirst. Grace listened. She let every word pass through her like birds across an open window, neither caught nor chased. Sometimes she nodded, sometimes murmured, sometimes smiled. The smile made Victoria uneasy. It owed her nothing. By dessert, a gold-dusted cake shimmering under chandelier light, Victoria set down her fork, fingers folding as if to sign a contract. Victoria, pleasantly, Grace, I think it's time we speak seriously. Family means support. Gregory and I have discussed it. If things are tight, we can help. A small monthly allowance, say, $700. Daniel's chair creaked. Lily looked up, startled. Gregory's hand landed on the table like a stamp of approval. Gregory, just to make life easier. And to let Daniel stay focused. Victoria, sweet as syrup. Of course, in return, maybe you could give the kids some space. Fewer calls, fewer visits, no more little errands like groceries or fixing bulbs. Young people get overwhelmed. We don't want small things ruining big ones. Allowance in exchange for absence. The words weren't said aloud, but they clung to the table, thick and hot in Daniel's throat. Daniel, hoarse. Mom, that's enough. Lily, whispering. Please, Mom. Victoria, smiling to Grace. Darling, I'm trying to help. What do you say? $700 isn't much, but it's sincere. Everyone can breathe easier. Grace set her fork down softly. She dabbed her lips with the napkin a rest before the crescendo. Grace, steady. I understand your intention. Victoria, relieved. Wonderful. I knew you were practical. Grace, meeting her eyes. I understand, but I don't accept. Because I don't need anyone's money to learn how to disappear from my son's life. Silence fell like the first snow. The clinking of cutlery stopped. Even the restaurant seemed to step back, leaving 4 people framed in wordless stillness. Gregory strained. You've misunderstood. Grace, calm, unyielding. No, $700 is the price of silence, of distance, of motherhood, outsourced. I understand that currency. Victoria, tight smile. You're too sensitive. I told you, it's for Daniel's sake. He can't split his responsibilities. Grace. Responsibility doesn't divide when it's built on love. It only divides when it's a burden. Daniel looked at his mother, pain and pride mingling in his eyes. Lily's hand tightened over his under the table. Victoria, softly, condescending. Grace, sensible people don't let pride get in the way of reality. We're not buying you, just buying peace. Grace, smiling faintly. Peace doesn't come from money. It comes from respect. And I haven't seen that on the menu tonight. Victoria blinked, unaccustomed to being displaced from her orbit. Gregory. All right, if the number bothers you, we can adjust. 800? 1,000? The goal is resolution. Grace, gentle, cold. It's not the number. It's what you call a person. The sommelier returned to pour more wine. Grace's glass remained clear. She lifted it, looking into the water, seeing a woman who had worn silence as armor and simplicity as shield. Tonight, the armor remained, but the blade gleamed. Grace, I'm not wealthy, but I have enough not to sell my right to be a mother. My son's love isn't a room to be vacated for others to move in. It's a home one I built, brick by brick. Don't offer to pay rent. The air tightened. Lily gripped Daniel's hand harder. Victoria, forcing a smile. Fine. Clearly, we're out of tune tonight, but balance is necessary. I just don't want Daniel held back by unspoken burdens. Grace, burdens have names, contempt, prejudice, and fear. Fear of those poorer than you, fear of anyone who might dirty your doorstep. From the piano came the first notes of a slow ballad. The lights dimmed. Grace tilted her head slightly, her tone soft, almost tender. Grace, I came tonight to confirm what I already suspected. Thank you for showing me, without the need for surgical lighting. Daniel quietly, trembling. Mom, let's go. Grace, touching his hand. In a minute. Sit down. She turned to Lily, her eyes glistening, but steady. Grace. Lily. Lily, swallowing. Yes, Mom. Grace, you don't need to apologize for someone else's mistake, but you must choose. Choose where you stand when wrong is done. Lily nodded slowly, as though unburdened by something heavy. The waiter slipped the bill onto the table, a small leather folder, the gateway to all kinds of truths. Gregory reached for it. Victoria stopped him. Victoria, I'll take it. She handed over a gold card. The waiter returned moments later, hesitant. Waiter, quietly. I'm sorry, ma'am. The card was declined. Possibly an international limit. Shall I try again? Victoria, strained smile. Try another. The second card declined again. Gregory frowned, pulling out his phone. Gregory, ridiculous. I'll call the bank. The tension cinched the air tight. Grace watched, not smugly, not pitying, but with calm detachment, as though the universe were gently evening its accounts. Daniel, softly. Mom, let me. Grace, shaking her head. No need. She opened her worn leather wallet and drew out a sleek, transparent card, heavy, metallic. The light caught it, scattering cold silver across the table. Grace, placing it down. I'll pay. And please, add a generous tip. The waiter hesitated a heartbeat, then nodded with quiet respect. Victoria stared at the card as if it were written in a language she didn't understand. Gregory put his phone down, silent. Grace, smiling lightly. Don't worry, I can handle tonight. Tomorrow, each of us can pay for what we've chosen, the parts of the story we've decided to live. She rose. Daniel and Lily followed. Victoria looked up, her smile half-formed, brittle. Victoria, softly. We're still family. Grace, calmly, yes. And family begins with respect. When you have that dish ready, invite me back. She touched Daniel's shoulder, nodded to Lily, and walked away. Her gray dress receded into the amber-lit hallway, each step steady like the ticking of a metronome. Outside, the night wind carried the scent of old rain clean and cool, washing away the heavy smell of wine and butter. Daniel breathed in deeply, still dazed. Daniel half smiling. Mom, you were incredible. Grace, gently. Strength isn't about defeating anyone. It's about not losing yourself. Lily, softly. Mom, I'm sorry. Grace, taking her hand. Apologies can wait till morning. For now, remember this feeling. It will help you choose right next time. Streetlights painted gold across the wet pavement. Inside, a faint banking call tone buzzed unanswered. Outside, peace new, quiet, and unbought settled in. The door had opened. Not the restaurant door, but the one between masks. And through that gap, what once was called simple finally found its voice. Slow, steady, and priceless. The restaurant lights were as warm as before, but the air had changed. After the server walked away, only the faint clink of cutlery against porcelain remained thin and scattered like a held breath. Victoria Hale lifted her wine glass, trying to regain composure after the declined card incident. Gregory tapped his fingertips lightly on the tablea habit whenever he felt things slipping out of control. Daniel glanced at his mother, his mind in knots of embarrassment, curiosity, admiration all tangled together. Lily bit her lip, eyes brimming, as if she had just witnessed something beyond everything she thought she knew about her mother-in-law. Grace sat there back straight, fingers resting on a glass of water. Not defensive, not angry, just still. A stillness that made others feel exposed. Victoria, dry smile. Unfortunate about the card. Banks can be a bit strict with international transactions sometimes. Gregory, filling in. Yes, it happens all the time. My accounts are UK-based, and conversion limits are such a nuisance. Grace, gently, without looking at them. It might be a different kind of limit, not the bank's, but the one in how we see people. The words were light, but they fell like a pebble on a lake, rippling into widening circles of silence. Victoria raising her head, voice sharper. What do you mean by that? Grace, I just find it interesting when someone talks about class and money in the same breath, as if music only exists in the most expensive instruments. Daniel leaned in slightly. Daniel, Mom, that's enough. There's no need. Grace, Smiley. It's all right, son. I'm just talking. She turned her water glass, eyes still mild, but her voice began to take on a metallic cadence. Grace, I didn't come here tonight to prove anything. I wanted to meet the family of a daughter-in-law I cherish, but I sat through the meal listening to stories about worth, about standards, about defining a good person by how one spends. And I wondered, are we having dinner or attending an auction of human dignity? Victoria let out a laugh slightly high, slightly forced. Victoria, you're misunderstanding. No one is auctioning anything. We simply live according to what we've achieved. Since when is pride and success a sin? Grace, it isn't. But pride and success doesn't require belittling others to feel taller. You see, confidence and arrogance are two lamps, different in the direction they shine. Gregory folded his arms. Gregory, you speak as if you know a great deal about light. Grace nodded slightly, a deep calm glinting in her eyes. Grace, as a matter of fact, I do. I work with it every day, the light of data, of numbers, of outcomes, and of people when they are given a chance. Victoria frowned. Victoria, what exactly are you implying? Grace set down her glass, slowly opened her bag, and took out a card the same sleek black the server had run earlier. The lights caught on the Platinum Business Elite logo, throwing a cool shimmer across the table. Grace. You asked what I do for a living, didn't you? I suppose I should have told the truth from the start. But I wanted to know how you would treat me if I carried no title at all. She lifted her head. Her voice did not rise, but every word was crisp. Grace. I am the Regional Operations Director at Halcyon Corporation, one of the largest retail chains in the Midwest. I manage more than 10,000 employees, oversee an annual budget north of $400 million, and I've earned about $40,000 a month for nearly 20 years. No one spoke. Only Lily's soft intake of breath, like witnessing a storm without wind that could still clear the table bare. Grace, gently. You called me simple. I truly am. I don't need luxury, and I don't need an $80 entree to know my worth. But I have created jobs for thousands of families, helped people once dismissed reclaim their place. And that without sparkly still light. Victoria opened her mouth, but her voice came out rough. Victoria, how is it that no one knew? Grace, because I don't flaunt it. And you, what do you flaunt to forget? Gregory swallowed. Daniel looked at his mother, his eyes a storm of pride, shame, and something tender he couldn't name. Grace turned to her son, her voice softening. Grace, I didn't hide it to spare you embarrassment. I hid it so you could stand on your own. I didn't want you to believe money measures value. But tonight I realized sometimes people need reminding that silence does not mean inferiority. Another hush swept in. Victoria clenched her napkin, her smile a brittle veneer. Victoria, you are very good at keeping secrets. Grace, not secrets, choices. I choose humility to see who is genuine. Lily spoke at last, her voice trembling. Lily, I'm sorry. I let my mother say things she shouldn't have. Grace, it's all right, dear. You didn't speak, but I hope next time you will. The silence of good people can hurt more than the words of the cruel. Victoria ground her teeth. Victoria, I only care about my daughter's future. Grace, evenly. Good. Then let me say this as a mother. You cannot teach your daughter to live happily if you still believe happiness must be purchased. Money can't buy class or empathy. Everything stopped. Gregory lowered his gaze. Victoria flushed anger or shame. It was hard to tell. Daniel reached for his mother's hand, as if afraid she might dissolve into the light he had just seen. Grace exhaled softly, her tone dropping. Grace, Mrs. Hale, you can buy anything, but you cannot buy respect. It only arrives when we treat others as human beings, not line items. The server returned with the check. Server, your total is $1,846. Gregory, starting to rise. Grace, gently. No need. I've got it. She placed the card on the table. The server bowed slightly and stepped away. No one stopped him. No one dared. While they waited, Grace turned to Lily. Grace, you love Daniel, I know that. But marriage isn't a place to prove status. It's where two people learn to bow to each other's kindness. Without that, everything else is just staging. Lily nodded, tears falling onto the white napkin. The server returned. Server, payment approved, ma'am. Grace, thank you. Please raise the tip. The staff shouldn't bear the pressure of our table. Victoria drew in a long breath, her voice awkward. Victoria, you certainly have style. Grace, not style. Respect. You should try it. It's free. She rose and reached for her coat. Daniel hurried to pull out her chair, his eyes glowing under the warm wash of the ceiling lights. Daniel quietly, I've never seen you like this. Grace, smiling. You've just never looked closely. She turned to Victoria, offering one last smile-a-knot cutting, simply true. Grace, I hope you have a good night. And if one day you meet someone with less money, less sparkle, remember, they might be the one paying for your meal. She left the table, her stride unhurried and straight. The server bowed slightly as she passed. Victoria sat motionless, hands clasped tight. Gregory looked from his wife to Grace's retreating figure, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Daniel and Lily followed. Outside, the night wind carried the scent of rain and a trace of lavender from the florist nearby. Lily, softly, "Your mother, she's extraordinary." Daniel, with a small smile, "No, she just knows when to be silent and when to speak. She's never needed to prove any until someone crossed the line." They stepped onto the sidewalk. Neon bled across the wet street. Grace looked up and felt the sky open lighter than when she'd walked in. Grace, aside, gently, "People think power is what you proclaim with your voice. In truth, it's the moment you remain calm even when you're being dismissed." She turned and smiled at her son and daughter-in-law. "Grace, come on, we've got a better dessert waiting, my apple pie." Daniel, "Teasin' if you'll share it with us, lower class folks." Grace laughing, "My class is past prejudice. No one can afford the ticket in." All three laughed. Their laughter drifted into the street, carried off by the wind. Behind them, Hale's bistro still shone, but now that light only threw the empty tables into sharper relief. The atmosphere in the restaurant tightened, like a violin string pulled too far. The small candles still burned, but their golden light no longer carried enough warmth to hide the chill that followed Grace's final words. Outside the glass window, the rain had stopped. Inside, another kind of rain lingered, rain made of pride, discomfort, and things too bitter to swallow. Victoria set down her wineglass, the sound of crystal meeting wood dry and sharp. The polite smile on her lips melted away like wax dripping from a dying flame. Gregory sat upright, eyes fixed on the white linen stripe across the table, his hands locked together, the veins on his knuckles showing blue. Daniel swallowed hard. Lily bit her lip until it turned pale, her fingers twisting the corner of her napkin as though looking for something to hold on to. Grace remained calm, not the calm of someone who had won, but of someone who had finally placed a stone in its rightful spot. She leaned back slightly, her breathing even, her eyes gentle but bright. Victoria, steady, tense. "I think tonight has gone too far. No one came here to humiliate anyone." Grace, "You're right." "And no one came here to buy another person's silence for $700 a month." A faint flush swept across Victoria's cheek. She turned to Gregory as if reaching for a lifeline, but he stayed silent, a silence heavy as judgment. "Gregory, we've misunderstood each other." Grace, softly, "No, I heard you quite clearly, every word, every number." Daniel drew a deep breath, turned to his mother, his voice cracking with emotion. "Daniel, Mom, I'm sorry. I assumed you were simple, struggling, someone who needed help. I never asked how you were really living. I never wondered why you were always so calm. I was wrong." Grace, smiling at him, steady. "You weren't wrong for thinking I live simply. You were wrong for thinking simplicity means weakness." Lily dabbed at her tears, a small sob pricking the air like a pin. "Lily, I'm ashamed, Mom. I let all of this happen right in front of me." "I've always known my mother measures people by money, brands, by numbers, and I said nothing. I was afraid to upset her. Grace, interrupting softly, like a hand resting on a trembling shoulder, "Silence out of fear is human, but silence that lasts becomes habit. You just broke that habit with your tears." Victoria let out a sharp, brittle laugh. "Victoria, how touching. So, because of one dramatic performance, you think you have the right to make everyone else feel small?" Grace, "No, ma'am. I didn't perform to make anyone feel small. I simply held up a mirror and passed it around. What people see in it is their own reflection." She paused half a beat, then looked Victoria straight in the eyes. "Grace, clearly, You said you speak 4 languages. Tell me, in which of those did you learn kindness? Tick, tick. The wall clock seemed to strike against Victoria's forehead. She pressed her lips together. The rim of her glass trembled faintly. Victoria, through clenched teeth. I don't need anyone to teach me kindness. I've lived long enough to know what survival means. You don't know where I come from. Grace, I don't dismiss anyone's past, but if survival makes you forget how to treat others, then your wounds are driving your life. That's not strength, that's fear deciding your worth. Gregory shifted in his chair but didn't meet anyone's eyes. Gregory, perhaps we should end this here. Grace nodding. I agree. But end doesn't mean forget. It means setting boundaries. She folded her napkin neatly, her tone firm but calm. Grace, my boundaries are simple. Respect people before you mention money. Don't put my son in a position where family love becomes negotiation. Don't trade allowance for a mother's absence. Don't use dinner as a ladder to elevate yourself by stepping on someone else. If it happens again, anywhere, anytime, I will stand up and walk away. Daniel nodded firmly, as if hearing an answer he'd waited for his whole life. Daniel, I stand with you, Mom. From tonight on, I'll make it clear to anyone, even my in-laws, that you're not a burden, not someone to be pitied. Lily turned to her mother, her voice trembling but resolute. Lily, Mom, please, stop speaking about his family that way. I love Marcus because of who he is, not because of what he has. If you belittle his mother, you're belittling me. Victoria rolled her eyes, but the fire had dimmed. She blinked. The thin mascara under her lashes quivered like a weak fence. Victoria, I only wanted you to have a secure future. Lily, security built on contempt cracks from the inside, Mom. A waiter approached, refilled the water glasses, hesitated, then slipped away again, leaving a faint glimmer on the rim of Grace's glass, like a soft punctuation mark. Grace rested her hand lightly on the table, her tone gentle again. Grace, Mrs. Hale, I believe you love your daughter, but love doesn't mean control. Love means teaching her to respect boundaries, her own and others. If money is the solution to every problem, sooner or later, money will take everything back in the form of loneliness. Victoria gave a short, sarcastic laugh. Victoria, sounds like a page from a self-help book. Grace, shrugging, a self-help book that actually works is worth more than any investment guide. The latter makes profit. The former keeps people. Gregory finally looked up. His eyes had softened. Gregory, I admit, I should have stopped this conversation earlier. I'm sorry I let things fall below basic respect. Grace, nodding. Thank you. The right apology saves a lot of invisible costs. Daniel chuckled softly. Daniel, Mom, you just used financial language to talk about emotional damage. Grace, teasing, makes it easier for you to understand, doesn't it? Daniel, I owe you for life. I'll never pay it back. Grace, you can by treating your wife and yourself with decency. That's enough. Lily sniffled, smiling through her tears. Lily, I'll try, especially at speaking up when I should. Grace, tilting her head. You already did. Practice works best in real time. A sigh drifted across the table. The candle before Victoria let out a small hiss, as if someone had blown gently. She looked at the flickering flame and spoke slowly. Victoria, I may not change overnight, but I'll try to talk less about money, compare less, defend less. Grace, that's enough for tonight. The waiter returned the card with the receipt marked paid in full. Grace didn't look at the number. She folded the bill and tucked it beneath the candle like a slip of paper protecting the linen from dripping wax. Grace, as for dinner, consider it my investment in a shared lesson. The return won't go into anyone's account, but into how we face each other from tomorrow on. Daniel laughed. Daniel, ROI in peace, best profit ever. Grace, and tax-free. Even Gregory laughed this time, not sharp, but genuine and warm. Lily hesitated, then looked directly at Grace. Lily, Mom, may I ask something? I want to come to your house for dinner this week. I'll bring dessert. I want to hear how you went from minimum wage to where you are now. Not to boast, to learn how not to need to boast. Grace, eyes softening. My door is always open. But on one condition: next time you see someone being looked down on, you'll tell me what you said. Lily glanced at her mother. Their eyes met one long blink, one quiet sigh, enough to show that a chain had loosened. Lily, I'll say. Here, we speak in respect, not in price. Grace nodded, sealing it. Victoria tightened her grip on her glass, then released it. She turned fully to Grace, her voice low. Victoria, I can't promise we'll be close. But from now on I won't call you a burden. Grace, I don't need closeness by etiquette, just decency by conscience. Gregory adjusted his tie. Gregory, then let's end the evening here. Next time, allow me to pick a simpler restaurant. I think our tastes fit better in places with less display. Grace, smiling. I like places by the window where you can watch people pass. Sometimes watching people fills you up more than food. Daniel, I'm calling dibs on apple pie. Lily, teasing. And I'm calling dibs on apple peeling. Grace, both jobs are taken, but there's always room for apprentices. Laughter spread softly across the table, like a pale wisp of smoke gliding over the last of the tension. Grace stood, slipping on her coat. Daniel, by instinct, pulled her chair back, then turned to help Lily. Gregory stepped aside politely, leaving space. Victoria rose last. She folded her white napkin neatly, laying it beside her plate, as if folding up an old habit. Before leaving, Grace turned to her. Grace, one last thing, a parting gift for the night. Real class doesn't need translation. It's the way you look at someone and see a human being before a price tag. Victoria pressed her lips together. Very slightly, she nodded. Just half a centimeter, but enough to hear the faint crack of a thin layer of ice breaking. They stepped out of the restaurant. The night air was cool, the pavement still damp. Daniel opened an umbrella, sheltering the three of them beneath a small, warm roof. They said nothing for a while, watching the streetlights stretch across the wet ground. Daniel, quietly, Mom, I'll talk to my in-laws tonight, properly. This time I'll speak, instead of staying silent. Grace, you already did. The rest is keeping your word. Lily tugged gently at Grace's sleeve. Lily, Mom, can I have your apple pie recipe? Grace, smiling, tilting her head. Of course. But the other recipe, the one for kindness, you'll have to cook and season yourself. The traffic light turned green. They crossed the street together. A faint scent of lavender drifted from a nearby flower stall, soft as a greeting from a new evening. Behind them, through the glass, Victoria still stood in the restaurant's amber glow. She watched them not with her usual hauteur, but with the searching eyes of someone sifting through herself. Among the 4 languages she spoke, was there one that taught kindness? A breeze passed through, tipping the candle flame on the table. The fire didn't go out. It flickered once, then steadied, like a promise unspoken, but already beginning. The taxi door shut, cutting off the noise of the restaurant behind her. Outside, the night wore a thin layer of mist, damp like the city's breath after rain. Streetlights streaked across the window, turning into blurred trails of gold, like memories still wet with tears. Grace sat in the back seat, her hand resting lightly on her purse. She leaned her head against the seat and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't have to pretend to be small. Driver, where to, ma'am? Grace smiling faintly. Home, or at least somewhere I can call home. Driver, sounds philosophical. Rough night? Grace, soft exhale, the longest in a long time, but also the most worthwhile. The car rolled forward. The wipers swept rhythmically, like a heartbeat. On the radio, a soft jazz tune played, no lyrics, only a saxophone winding through the air, speaking for all the things people leave unsaid. Driver, glancing in the mirror. You don't look like the kind of person who gets tired from parties. Your face says, just won a battle without throwing a punch. Grace, smiling. Maybe. Or maybe I just let go of something heavy. Driver, if you can let go, you're rich. Not money rich, peace rich. The words made Grace open her eyes slightly, watching her reflection shimmer in the window. Faint, but for the first time, not unfamiliar. Grace. You know, people think being rich means having more. But I just realized being rich means not needing to prove anything anymore. Driver. Exactly. Most folks spend their lives proving themselves to people who never cared. Then one day, when they're worn out, they finally see no one can measure their worth but themselves. Grace. I used to stay silent just to keep the peace. But it turns out, staying silent too long is another way of letting others define you. The taxi stopped at a red light. The driver turned slightly, his eyes kind but weathered, the kind of man who had heard too many backseat confessions, yet still listened as if each one mattered. Driver, what do you do for a living? You don't seem ordinary. Grace, soft chuckle. A few people figured that out tonight. Driver, so I guess you taught someone a lesson? Grace, not really teaching. Just telling the truth. And honestly, telling the truth is sometimes how you free yourself. She leaned back deeper into the seat, her tone slowing as if she were telling the story to herself. Grace, I've hidden who I am for years. Not out of shame, but because I was afraid people would love me for the wrong reasons, out of gratitude or pity. But tonight, when I said everything, I felt lighter. Like I finally gave my name back to myself. Driver. That's tough. Not everyone dares to be real when others only want to hear what comforts them. Grace. I used to think strength meant needing no one. Now I know real strength is being able to say, I still need love, just not pity. The light turned green. The car glided on, past rain-slick streets where reflections of lamps stretched out like threads connecting past and present. Driver. I always tell my passengers, you're rich when you can sleep without checking your wallet, and you're at peace when you no longer need to prove you're right. Seems like you've got both. Grace, smiling. I've only got one honesty. That one buys the other two. Driver. True. Honesty's the one currency that never loses value. They both laughed. Not loudly, but sincerely, like two strangers finding common ground at a quiet intersection in the night. After a while, Grace turned to look out the window. The streetlight's glow spilled over her hands, hands that had signed hundreds of contracts, now gently folded together, still as a wordless prayer. Grace. I've sat in boardrooms filled with people who spoke only of metrics, budgets, profits, and never of kindness. They thought it was weakness, but really, it's the foundation of everything. Driver. Kindness is the longest-term investment there is, slow to pay, but never in loss. Grace, nodding. And no one needs to audit it. They both laughed again. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving behind the faint, earthy scent of wet ground. The car turned into a quiet neighborhood, where porch lights cast soft halos over damp cobblestones. Driver. We're here, ma'am. Grace, handing over her card. Keep the change. Driver, shaking his head. No need. I've already been paid by your story. Grace, smiling. Then we're even. I've been paid by your listening. She opened the door. The cold air rushed in. Before she could close it, the driver leaned slightly toward her. Driver. You know, everyone who gets in my cab carries some kind of weight, but few step out as light as you. Keep that smile. It's worth more than a platinum card. Grace, smiling through the mirror. Maybe because it wasn't bought with money. The door shut. The engine hummed away into the distance. Grace stood before her apartment, small but bright. She looked up at the window, where her own reflection hovered between bands of light and shadow. For a moment, she felt free. Not because of power, not because of victory, but because of honesty, the one thing no one could ever take from her, she whispered to herself, like a closing line to the night. The truly rich don't need to flaunt it, they just need peace, and the honest don't need to be believed, only to stop fearing their own truth. Then she stepped inside and gently closed the door. Out on the street, the lights stretched long and low, as if the city itself exhaled along with the woman who, after one long night, had finally returned truth, boundaries, and kindness to where they belonged. Morning light streamed through the curtains, golden, soft, filtered as if through mist. In the small apartment, the sound of water boiling in the kettle and the faint aroma of roasted coffee filled the air. Grace sat by the kitchen table, her hair neatly tied back, finishing the morning news on her tablet. Every time the wind blew, the lavender branches outside swayed, scattering a few tiny purple petals onto the windowsill. The wooden door opened. Daniel walked in tired, but with a brightness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He wasn't wearing his usual suit, just a white rolled-sleeve shirt. His hair was tousled, his face carrying the look of someone who'd gone through a long night and finally learned how to breathe. Grace, looking up, smiling. "You're up early, son. Coffee?" Daniel, hanging his jacket. "2 cups, please. I need to wake up both body and mind today." Grace, teasing. People usually say that before they tell a big story. Daniel sitting down, smiling tiredly. "It is a big story, Mom. I just talked to the Hales." The spoon in Grace's hand paused for a beat, but she didn't rush him. She simply set it down and spoke with a calmness that could still a lake. "Grace, good. And?" Daniel. And everything exploded. Grace, still composed. "You hurt?" Daniel, chuckling. "Only a few egos, not mine." She smiled softly and poured the coffee. Steam rose, fragrant and quiet. Daniel watched her for a moment before letting out a long breath. "Daniel, you know, Mom, I've never spoken to them so clearly before. All this time I thought keeping the peace was the best way. But last night, watching you sit there calm amid all their contempt, I realized I'd been silent for too long." Grace, nodding gently. "Silence is a choice too. But sometimes it makes people think we agree with them." Daniel, "I know that now, and I don't want to live that way anymore." He began recounting everything, every word, every look. Early that morning, he had gone to the Hales mansion. Victoria sat there, mint tea in one hand and her iPad in the other. Gregory stood by the window, as always, checking stock prices. The whole scene looked peaceful, but it was the kind of peace that wears makeup. Victoria, looking up. "Daniel, you're early. Do you and Lily need something again?" "No, Mother. I came to talk, not to ask." Gregory, that tone sounds more like an employee about to quit than a son-in-law. "If a family is like a company, then maybe I'm resigning from the management style." Victoria put her teacup down, her eyes flashing. "Victoria, what's that supposed to mean?" "Daniel, Lily and I are moving out. No financial support, no post-marital allowance. We want to build our own life and take full responsibility for it." The room froze. Gregory dropped his newspaper onto the table and looked at Daniel from head to toe. "Gregory, do you even know what you're saying? Do you realize how expensive life is in this city? Lily's 2-bedroom apartment alone costs more than your monthly salary." Daniel, quiet but firm. "I know. And because I know, I want to earn it myself, not trade someone else's money for someone else's silence or someone else's shame." Victoria gave a short, trembling laugh. Victoria, is that your idea or your mother's? Daniel meeting her eyes. Mine, but my mother reminded me what dignity sounds like. At that moment, Lily came out of the kitchen, hair still damp from a shower, voice small but steady. Lily, and it's mine too, Mom. I can't let my husband carry guilt in my own family. Victoria's grip tightened on the armrest. Victoria, so you're both turning against your parents? Rejecting our help? Lily, no, Mom. We're just rejecting control disguised as help. The words dropped like a pin in the quiet room. Gregory turned away, and Victoria stood abruptly. Victoria, if that's what you want, then fine. From next month, no more support. No car, no secondary account, no transfers, nothing. Daniel, thank you, Mother. For the first time, that feels like a real gift. The reply stunned her. Gregory looked at Daniel for a long time before saying, You'll regret this. Daniel, maybe, but at least I'll regret it with my own money. Daniel stopped there in his story, rubbing his forehead. Daniel, they were furious, Mom. Both of them. But strangely, I wasn't afraid. I just felt light. Grace, smiling, softly. Light because you finally stood tall. And when you stand tall after bowing for too long, your shoulders ache a little. Daniel laughed, leaning back in his chair. Daniel, you always have this way of making me feel embarrassed and proud at the same time. Grace, then hug me. It'll help. He stood and wrapped his arms around her. In that embrace was warmth, the kind shared by two people who had finally crossed a distance, measured not by miles, but by silence. A moment later, Lily came in. She wore a pale gray sweater, her hair in a bun, holding 2 croissants in her hands. Lily, I heard everything from the hallway. My husband here could tell stories for a living that sounded like a heroic movie. Daniel, at least this movie has a happy ending because you're in it. Lily, smirking, don't get too romantic. I've got a job interview in an hour. Grace, now that's real love working together, not just dreaming together. All 3 laughed. The small kitchen filled with the sound of spoons clinking against mugs and the aroma of coffee blending with warm pastry. Daniel looked at his mother, his tone softening. Daniel, Mom, I think I finally understand. Last night, when you said money can't buy class or empathy, I thought it was just a beautiful line. But now, I see it's the truest thing I've ever lived. Grace placing her hand over his. Thank you, son. Respect isn't inherited, it's taught, by example. Outside, sunlight slanted through the window, catching the steam rising from 3 coffee cups. Lily took a sip, then turned. Lily, Mom, if it's possible, I'd like you to meet my parents again someday. I know it won't be easy, but I want them to see you're the kind of woman they can't belittle, no matter how hard they try. Grace, smiling. No need to prove anything, sweetheart. You and Daniel living with integrity, that's the most beautiful answer already. At that moment, Daniel looked at his mother, the woman once called simple, not enough. And he understood. Her calmness had taught him the most important lesson of all, that true strength isn't in a loud voice, but in a heart that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Grace stood and began rinsing the coffee cups. As water ran over her hands, she heard Daniel's voice behind her. Daniel, Mom, I think I've got a new quote for your podcast. Grace, let's hear it. Daniel, independence isn't about rejecting others, it's about loving them the right way. Grace, smiling, looking up. That's one of those quotes that makes people stop mid-step. Record it right now. Lily, raising her phone. Already did. They all burst out laughing. And in that laughter, there was no echo of pain, only the sound of 3 people who had found each other among the pieces, and who now understood that family would never again be measured by money, but by the peace they felt when they were together. The 3rd afternoon since that fateful dinner, the air was chillier than usual. Last night's rain had left a thin mist over the little street. The day's last sunrays slipped through the leaves, scattering gold across the brick steps where Grace sat, a book in her hand that she wasn't reading. She simply stared off into the distance, the front garden blooming with late lavender, a gentle purple fragrance like the breath of a settled heart. An engine stopped at the gate. Grace looked up and saw Lily step out, a beige coat draped over her shoulders, a small bouquet wrapped in brown paper in her hand. She stood hesitating for a few seconds, then drew a deep breath, her eyes both flustered and resolute. Grace, smiling, gentle. Daisies? Good choice. A strong flower hardly anyone notices. Lily, awkward, smile. Yes, I was going to bring a cake, but then I thought you probably have more cakes than I could ever bake well. Grace, lightly. That's true, of cake. Flowers, not so much. Come in, sweetheart. The wooden door opened. The warmth of herbal tea drifted out like an embrace. Lily stepped inside, her shoes clicking softly on the wood floor. The little house was warm and tidy, not luxurious, yet every corner gave off a sense of care, refinement, and a soul. Grace poured the tea, mint and honey intertwined. They sat facing each other, a fragile thread of steam rising between them from two porcelain cups. Grace, only 3 days, and you look different already. Is there something weighing on your heart? Lily, lowering her voice. Yes, it's me. I need to apologize to you. Grace was silent. Not because she was surprised, but because she knew some apologies only bloom when the speaker is truly ready to change. Lily, I don't know where to start. These past few days, I've felt swept between two worlds. On one side, my family, where everything is measured in money. On the other, you, where I see everything measured by the heart. Grace, softly. You can start in the middle, right where you're standing. Lily took a deep breath, her eyes bright with tears that didn't fall. Lily, I was born into a home that's terrified of poverty. My dad went bankrupt when I was 8. My mom sold her wedding ring, then started over. Since then, they stopped talking about joy, only about stability. They saw money as the only safety rope. Every time Dad signed a new contract, Mom would polish every coin as if it were a medal. I grew up with lessons ringing in my ears: if you don't have money, you'll be looked down on. Grace, reflective, and now you have money. Are you looked down on? Lily gave a small smile and shook her head. Lily, no, but now I'm afraid of displeasing people. Afraid of my mother, afraid of my father, afraid of being called ungrateful. I stayed silent when they insulted you, not because I agreed, but because I was scared they'd withdraw their love. I don't know how to love without fear. Grace looked at the young woman before her, and in that gaze she saw something she had once seen in her own mirror. The eyes of someone who has just realized she's been silent for far too long. Grace, silence to keep love is something many of us have done, but true love doesn't need silence to survive. Lily, I know. I understand that now. These 3 days, I kept looking at you and seeing someone who never needs to prove anything. You didn't raise your voice, didn't seek revenge. You simply said what needed to be said, yet made everyone think. I want to learn that. I want to learn to live with dignity, not the proud kind, but the peaceful kind. Grace smiled, tilting her head. Grace, dignity doesn't come from money, but it doesn't oppose money either. It just teaches you to put money in its proper place. Lily, looking up, can you teach me? Grace, tender. No one can teach you that with words. Only habits can. A brief silence. Lily tightened her grip on the cup. Lily, habits, like what? Grace, like spending with gratitude instead of fear. Asking someone how they're feeling today before asking how much they've made. Giving gifts without expecting praise, and saying no without feeling guilty. Those small things are your inner compass. When you're honest with it, you won't let others steer your course. Lily went still, her eyes shining. Lily, how can you be so gentle, even after being looked down on? Grace, because I know they're speaking out of their own fear. Once you understand that, you no longer need to be angry at them. You only need to not become them. Lily pressed her lips together. Her voice trembled. Lily, I used to think you were the kind of person who was too quiet. I didn't understand why you didn't react, didn't push back, didn't get angry. But now I do, because you don't need to. Grace, Smiley, I don't need anger to prove I'm right. When you know who you are, you don't need to prove anything anymore. That's the greatest freedom. A light breeze drifted through. The white curtain stirred. Lily looked out the window, her voice dropping. Lily, I want to start over. With you, with Daniel, with myself. I want to live truthfully, not driven by other people's emotions, not letting money dictate my self-respect. Grace. Then start today. No grand changes needed. Just be honest with your smallest feelings. When you're hurt, say so. When you're wrong, apologize. When you're grateful, show it. Simple truth pulls you out of the loops you used to get trapped in. Lily nodded lightly. A single tear fell quick but true. Lily, smiling faintly. I'll probably need to stumble a lot before I learn to walk straight. Grace, we all do. What matters is that you learn to stand up facing the right way. They both laughed. The air felt as light as tea vapor dissolving in the afternoon sun. Lily looked around the home once more, the books, a photo of Daniel as a child, and a neatly lettered card pinned to a cabinet. Integrity is quiet. Strength. Lily, that line is beautiful. Yours? Grace, mine, but I learned it from life. The strength of kindness is always quiet, but never weak. Lily set the bouquet on the table and stood, yet she didn't want to leave. She looked at Grace, hesitating. Lily, have you ever forgiven Mrs. Victoria? Grace, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let the wound drive your actions anymore. When I understand why people do what they do, I no longer need their apology to be at peace. Lily, I hope one day my mother understands that. Grace, if you change, she'll see it. You don't have to persuade her, just live. Lily stepped onto the porch. The sun had dipped, leaving only a last band of honeyed light across her hair. A breeze stirred, sending a few lavender petals skimming by. She turned back, her voice trembling yet firm. Lily, thank you. I used to dread people saying, I'm like you, but now I hope it becomes true. Grace stepped forward and placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder. Grace, if you truly become like me, I'll be proud. But do better than me. That's what healing is. Lily smiled and bowed her head. As she walked down the steps, Grace watched her eyes gentle and bright like a porch light. The engine started, then faded away. In the little house, only the scent of tea and the steady tick of the old clock remained. Grace returned to the table, looked at the daisies, and a brief smile appeared. She murmured, as if to herself, when someone can bow their head to apologize, that's when they begin to stand tall. Outside, the night breeze returned. The lavender remained light, purple, and true like the heart of a woman who has learned to move forward, not with retaliation, but with forgiveness and dignity. That afternoon, Lily left Grace's house in the golden light of sunset. The street was drenched in lavender scent, soft wind brushed her hair, sunlight warmed her shoulders like a quiet blessing from the universe. Her steps were light, her gaze lighter still, and her heart, after years of fear, finally knew what freedom felt like. Left alone, Grace closed the door and turned back into her small apartment. The familiar space greeted her: cream walls, a few framed photos, a modest bookshelf, and a warm golden glow spilling over the wooden table. It wasn't a grand home, but everything about it spoke of sufficiency, not of wealth, but of peace. Grace brewed another cup of tea, mint rising through the room. She sat down and watched the fading sunlight scatter gold across the floor. Beside her sat a small wooden box, the one that once held her mother's final letter, old but steadfast. Grace whispering, "Mom, I think I finally understand. Being rich isn't about the numbers in a bank account. It's when you no longer have to pretend to be poor just to be respected." She smiled a light smile, the kind that comes after a long journey home. No longer did she have to hide beneath modesty, nor prove her worth through business cards and titles. The truth had been spoken, the boundaries drawn, and what remained was peace. Evening descended. The phone rang. It was Daniel. Daniel, and, I got the new job. Strategic Development Department. The pay's a bit lower, but my boss is incredibly kind. Grace, that's good, son. Kind people teach you how to work without bowing. Yeah, and I've officially mastered the art of not borrowing from my mother-in-law. Grace, chuckling, that art I teach, free of charge. Daniel, Lily's learning too. She said, "You're rich when you can tell the truth without fear of judgment." I think she's really changing, Mom. Grace looked out the window, her expression softening. Grace, change doesn't have to be fast, son. Just real. Real with others and real with yourself. Daniel, hesitant. Mom, I'm sorry. Forever thinking you needed saving. Now I get it, you never needed rescuing. You just needed to be heard honestly. Grace, thank you, but you're wrong about one thing. Everyone needs saving at some point, Daniel. I did too. And the one who saved me was you when you had the courage to say no to what was wrong. There was silence on the other end. Then came Daniel's voice, low and full of feeling. Daniel, then you should know, I've never seen you more beautiful than when you stood up for yourself. Grace, softly. And I've never seen you more grown than when you chose to live truthfully. They both laughed, their laughter mingling with the falling dusk, like two notes bridging generations. Different, but in harmony. After the call, Grace stepped out onto the balcony. Before her stretched the city under twilight buildings, lights, and the evening breeze carrying the scent of damp earth. Peace so deep it felt almost sacred. She thought of the years she'd hidden her identity from a successful woman to a simple single mother, just to avoid distance, comparison, and the kind of judgment that measures worth in dollars. Now, looking back, she didn't blame herself. Sometimes we have to lose our name to understand how precious it truly is. Grace, whispering, I've gone full circle, only to find myself again. She looked at her hands, the same ones that had signed hundreds of contracts, trembled holding her mother's letter, and wiped Daniel's tears. But today, they no longer trembled. Grace, closing her eyes, wealth isn't having more, it's knowing enough. Peace is the most luxurious thing a person can own. Night fell, and the apartment glowed with light. On the table lay a new letter one she wrote to herself. Dear Grace, if one day you forget your worth, remember this moment, sitting in your small home, with no applause, no criticism, but a heart calm as a lake after a storm. You are already rich because no one can steal your peace. She folded the letter and placed it beside the photo of her mother and Daniel. One represented the past, one the future. And she stood between them, fully alive in the present. Morning came. She brewed tea, opened the window. The lavender scent drifted in again, still the same fragrance. But this time, she wasn't standing in anyone else's light. She was standing in her own. Daniel and Lily came to visit. Lily carried a plate of toast. Daniel, a basket of fruit. Lily, Mom, I baked this myself. It's a little burnt. Grace, smiley. Burnt bread is honest bread. I like it. Daniel. And I made the coffee, but forgot the sugar. Grace. Bitter coffee is for remembering. Sugars for forgiving. Perfect combination. They all laughed. The small apartment filled with voices, laughter, the smell of toast and coffee, and lavender drifting through the balcony, all blending into a quiet symphony of peace. Lily, looking at Grace. You know, Mom, I finally understand. Home isn't the richest place. It's the place where you can be yourself and still be loved. Grace, Smiley. And that's the one kind of wealth I've never lost. When Daniel and Lily left, Grace stood by the door, watching them go. The sunlight fell across her face, gentle, kind, and assured. She was no longer a woman hiding, no longer someone needing to prove anything. She was simply Grace, a woman who once lost everything, only to discover that what remained was the real treasure. Grace, whispering, I don't have to pretend to be poor anymore, because peace is a wealth no one can buy. The breeze stirred the curtains, light streamed through the window, illuminating the words she once hung on the wall. Rich is the heart that sleeps without fear. Grace touched the lettering, closed her eyes, and smiled. No more dialogue, only light, wind, and the breath of a woman who had finally come home to herself.